into doing more science-based things. You know, the Rap Guide to Evolution was 2009. Is that what it was?
Yeah.
Yeah, so right. 10 years, which was spectacular. It's spectacular and very well received by people in the field. And he's gone on to sort of have this brand, right, of the Rap Guide to things. And Climate Chaos is something we saw in New York in 2016. It's awesome. He's done Consciousness. Culture is on the horizon. There's a whole series of them. It's a great show. Everybody, welcome.
Thank you. So Jamie saw this performance off Broadway 3 years ago, and then it closed. I toured it, and then they gave me the opportunity to bring it back to New York. So I've rewritten about a third of it. So we'll see what you feel is new. But this will be the first audience to see the brand new off Broadway version outside of New York.
International negotiators have gathered once again this week at the annual United Nations Climate Change Conference to try to negotiate a binding global agreement with the ambition of limiting the global temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius in order to avoid the most severe impacts of global warming. With 1 degree of warming already recorded in this century alone, and record-setting temperatures and extreme weather events occurring with ever greater frequency, the stakes could not be higher. Negotiations appear to be deadlocked, threatening the stability of future generations, and we're being told as a last-ditch effort, the conference organizers have brought in an outside mediator, Brinkman. Not much is known about Mr. Brinkman. He's referred to online as a rap artist, which from the look of him must be erroneous. Also, he's Canadian, which makes him overly agreeable and polite, unlikely qualities to find in a tough negotiator. We now go live to the UN Assembly where Mr. Brinkman is about to speak.
Thank you. It's a great honor for me to be asked to address this August group of world leaders. It is an exclusive club, as you can see. Each of you represent nations of millions, and we've been asked to come together to solve the climate crisis, so this is my message to world leaders. You want a new definition of hardcore? Check out the Intergovernmental Climate Report. It says the world is getting warmer unequivocally, and the oceans have increased 30% in acidity, and 90% of the warming trend is oceanic and concentrated in the Arctic. Nobody panic, but the level of greenhouse gases in the air is higher now than it's been in millions of years. We added more than 1 trillion tons of CO2 to the atmosphere, and it's gonna be centuries before some of the gas is clear. I'm dropping science, unvarnished, unbiased, but I don't blame you if your instinct is to deny it, cause we evolved to prioritize immediate threats. If it bleeds, it leads, that's what the media says. So let the gangster ask rap music paint a picture, and I'll hit you with some evidence-based predictions. Get ready for wars, famines, droughts, floods, hurricanes, heat waves, murders, dogs, chaos, refugees, stress, disease, extinction, disaster, IPCC. Hollywood summer blockbusters can't touch this. I get my thrills from the latest reports published by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, formed in 1988 to get the science straight. Now they dropped the 5th assessment and the data's up to date, so allow me to summarize. Bad things on the way, higher emissions, sea level rise, dire predictions, on target for disaster, movie style predicaments. Some people want to set a limit of 2 degrees, but that's still enough to disintegrate major ice sheets over the course of centuries, or maybe decades. Yeah, some of the details are still up for debate. They fluctuate between certain disaster and likely disaster, slow and steady or higher and faster. Consensus, it's the lowest common denominator, which means it's probably going to be way worse than the wars, famines, droughts, floods, hurricanes, heat waves, murders, thugs, chaos, refugees, stress, disease, extinction, disaster, IPCC. So be afraid, be very afraid, but we're not. despite what the scenarios say, and the effect of talking about it is visible yawning and occasionally changing our behavior microscopically, and even those who get it tend to get it logically but not viscerally, so we're navigating myopically. The threat is existential, it's not environmental, and your individual response is inconsequential. Only coordination of our whole species is gonna keep coastal cities from sinking below the deep seas. And when was the last time a solution included all of us? Geophysics is at the mercy of geopolitics. Climate change communicators, keep it positive. People need to feel like they still have options, and we do have options. Either we find a solution or we stick with the business as usual level pollution and get used to the wars, famines, droughts, floods, hurricanes, heat waves, murders, bugs, chaos, refugees, stress, disease, extinction, disaster, IPCC, wars, famines, droughts, floods, hurricanes, heat waves, murders, bugs, chaos, refugees, stress, disease, extinction, disaster, IPCC. Thank you. See, I like to keep it positive for the kids. Now, nations are deadlocked. It's around 95% that are ready to sign off on the 1.5 degrees Celsius cap for the globe, but there are still a few holdout nations. I will not be naming names, but you know who you are in the room tonight. Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Australia, Russia, United States. So the goal is to try to actually get everyone together on one consensus using the only tool that has never been attempted, negotiating at the UN. Rap music. So this next song will break down the history of climate science discoveries in addition to adding some hip-hop terminology in case we have any rap novices in the house. I'll drop some of the nomenclature. Check it out. Let's take it back 200 years to the 1800s, up in here when we only had 290 CO2 parts per million in the atmosphere. We had 1 billion Homo sapiens on the planet trying to get their groove on, and soon lots of them would, thanks to industrial revolution. And back when the steam engine had just been invented and nothing was electric except the spirit of the times, progress driven by the scientific method. Joseph Fourier was a Frenchman, a physicist and a mathematician. He discovered the fact that the atmosphere acts like a blanket for heat retention. The greenhouse effect, first described in 1824. Visible light from the sun meets little resistance inbound because the size of the wavelengths is hella tight. But then when it hits the earth, it emits infrared radiation with longer waves, and they get trapped and bounce back when they try to escape on their way back up into space. And climate skeptics today, from Ted Cruz to Rand Paul to Bobby Jindal, might say bounce back off of what? Introducing John Tyndall. In the 1860s, Tyndall investigated methane and CO2 and water vapor to see whether any of them block infrared radiation, and they all do. But methane and water vapor don't stick around in the atmosphere for long. It took a Swedish genius to identify carbon dioxide as a regulator, Svante Arrhenius. 1896, Svante did the math. If you cut the CO2 levels in half, you'll end up with a 4 to 5 degree temperature drop all across the map. But if you double it, he calculated a temperature escalation of 5 or 6 degrees because water vapor increases with heat radiation, and that feeds back to increase the heat. Of course, in 1896, CO2 emissions were pretty moderate, so they thought it would take a couple thousand years to double the concentration when they thought of it. But you gotta give it to Svante. He predicted 5 or 6 degrees, and that's within the warming range predicted today by the IPCC. Now, in 1927, Arrhenius died, a celebrated Swedish civilian, and 3 years later, the population of planet Earth exceeded 2 billion. In 1938, a British engineer by the name of Guy Callender discovered a rise in carbon dioxide and also measured a rise in temperature. In 1958, Roger Revelle demonstrated that the oceans couldn't take care of it. He said humans are now carrying out a massive geophysical experiment. In 1960, Charles Keeling did some measurements on Mauna kilowatt of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and every year the level appeared to go up. It was rising at a steady rate, the same rate as emissions from us burning oil and coal. Also in 1960, the population hit 3 billion souls, and now we got 7.2 billion individuals in the same boat, all hooked on fossil fuels like a drug. And how are we gonna quit, huh? Just say no? There's no easy answers. There's just the truth and its inconvenience. But the scientific evidence is not recent. You can ask Svante Arrhenius. Now we got 410 parts per million in the atmosphere, and that's an increase in CO2 density of 40% in 2 centuries. So either we set a carbon budget, we set a cap, and we stay within the limit, or else we can expect the greenhouse effect to make it hot in here. And that's physics. All right. So, the attitudes of people towards climate change vary, obviously, otherwise it would not be politically contentious. There's a project called the Yale Climate Communications Study, which looks at the various attitudes, and they have changed over the years. Here in 2010, it was 12% dismissive, and it was about 13% alarmed, and then the alarmed has been fluctuating, the dismissive has been fluctuating, but generally you do see some movement towards the left from the right in terms of people's attitudes. The alarmed is going up. Dismissive never tends to go down below about 9%. Look, it inflated to 13 after Trump got elected, so people rode the wave there for a minute. But then by the end of last year, we had gone from 13% to 29% alarmed. So, I see it as progress, but this is entrenched. And until we can get consensus among everybody, we are not going to get the global sign-off that's required. So the conflict between the left and right can be expressed through helpful illustrations. Everyone here should try to find themselves on the graph. Where is your attitude represented amongst these different characters? Or if you prefer hip-hop references, you can actually represent attitudes towards climate change by replacing the word money with the word carbon in several popular rap songs. So if you are on this side of the spectrum, you probably agree with Jay-Z when he says, it's all about gas guzzling with the top down, screaming out, carbon ain't a thing. Do we have any carbon ain't a thing people in the house? Generally, they won't admit it, unless it comes to blocking legislature moves. And then if you don't agree with Jay-Z, then you probably agree with the Notorious B.I.G. when he says, I don't know what they want from me. It's like the mo carbon we talk about, the mo problems we see. Do we have mo carbon, mo problems people in the house? Probably, right? It tends to be generally higher percentages, as you saw before. Now, Notorious B.I.G. has a song about conflict that can help us in this conflict-ridden era. It's called What's Beef? Notorious B.I.G.'s version of beef includes definitions that may or may not apply here. In his version, beef is when your moms ain't safe up in the streets. Beef is when you get your enemies to start your hopefully entirely electrified Jeep. Beef is when you roll no less than 30 deep. I'm not sure if the climate communication conflicts have quite reached the Biggie Smalls level yet, but we may be going that way, possibly with a new civil war, as some people represent in fiction, right? We hopefully don't get that far. So I'm going to try to represent all of the climate skeptic arguments in one remix of the Notorious B.I.G. song, but just let's be clear that in my version, beef only refers to vigorous scientific disputation. Yeah. Do you know what beef is? Do you really know? Ha 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 ha. Check out this bizarre person trying to claim that global warming isn't human caused. Anthropogenic climate change skeptics convinced that the liberal media's out to get them. They're cherry picking the bitter temperature data and trying to claim that climate change is in hiatus. It's not. The trends are still going straight up, but they ain't trying to change their minds once they're made up. So now the scientists know, but the public doesn't. They think the government can't be trusted. It's up to something. Either they deny there's a consensus or they view it through conspiracy lenses. So what's beef? Beef is when the scientific findings all agree. Beef is when the public perceives controversy. Beef is when the contrarian view, with no data supporting it, still gets through. What's beef? Beef is the whole field of climatology. Beef is 97% against 3. Beef is when your worldview predetermines what you don't believe and what you do.
Climate is changing, and climate has always changed, and it always will. There's archaeological evidence of that. There's biblical scientific evidence of that. There's historic evidence of that. It will always change. The hoax is that there are some people who are so arrogant to think that they are so powerful they can change climate.
So you're saying that the science is biased because the temperature changed rapidly in the Younger Dryas, and if the climate really changed in the past but without fossil fuels, well, what's up with that? First, portray the science as nothing but shaky guesswork, then cite the research of a bunch of fake experts. There's a formula, and some are paid to follow it, but most of them are just in an echo chamber that swallowed it, and some are even smart as whips, sharp as tacks. All their cleverness just makes them clever with the facts. They emphasize controversy and uncertainty, like we should really just wait and keep researching. Science always has to deal with probabilities. It's how we interpret them that reveals our flexibility. Like if it's a 1% terrorist threat, that's a killing spree. Better invest in the military. But when the science is 98% confident about the climate, they're like, oh, scientists admit dissent. Well, that's the method. Scientists have to admit it. I guess they need some backup from some rappers who get it. So what's beef? Beef is like totally the worst food that you can choose to eat if you really care about CO2 emissions. It's way worse than chicken, but look at how much worse it is than pork. By this metric, bacon is a vegetable. Of course, if you really want to be a saint, I would recommend falafel, although I can't claim to always be a saint myself. I mean, it is like your worldview can determine what you don't eat and what you do. But wait, what about my worldview? How was it shaped? I'm a liberal Canadian, environmentally raised. When I was 13, my mama was working on her master's on climate change researching, and my dad ran a company that planted trees. My family did forestry. Yo, that's me. In 1992, my mama's thesis was about CO2 and Sfonte Arrhenius. So if you try to tell me climate change isn't serious, that's dissing my mama. I'm cliquish. People tend to believe what their friends believe and believe the opposite of perceived enemies. So pick a team, baby. What's it gonna be? Is it Team Trump or Team Green Energy? Team Evolution or Team Creationism? I'm taking the scientific mainstream position, and the scientific mainstream on climate change says it's dangerous, it's happening, and yeah, it's man-made. And there's a debate, but it's not against the few who doubt it. The debate is what to do about it. What's beef? All right, so not sure if I've converted everyone in the room in case there was any skeptics here, but I want to take this a little bit deeper because it's not just global, it is also local. The National Climate Assessment is produced by the federal government, by the White House, in fact. It looks at all the climate impacts, human and economic, here in the U.S., and I've created a helpful summary just in case the president didn't read it. I was hoping he would be here in his delegated seat at the UN, but he didn't show up, so I'm going to have to perform this to his empty chair like Clint Eastwood at the RNC. Hopefully he will see it on television. Mr. Donald Trump, you're not my president, because I'm not a citizen. I'm just an immigrant, a permanent resident, stuck in the midst of it, rubbernecking as America drove off a cliff thinking, I wish I could vote, but not for you though, hell no. I voted for Justin Trudeau. Here's a couple things that I think you know, even if you act in public like you don't. Climate change, you know that is happening, know that its impact is already damaging, you said so. A permit you applied for said the ocean's coming up on your Irish Gulf course. Well, here's another place you might like to protect. America, it's likewise under threat. Sea level rise, extreme weather events, infrastructure risk is bad for business. So I made a list to help you keep track. And since you don't read, I squeezed it in a rap. Would have put it in a tweet if I could achieve that. The seaside's about to need an evac. Erosion of coastlines, riverbeds of time left. Only chance we're gonna get erosion of the public trust. Coal burners filling up our lungs with dust. Erosion of faith in democracy. Your face in the dictionary next to hypocrisy. Erosion, erosion, erosion. Mr. President, you know the fire season's out of control. Losses have doubled since I was 6 years old, with damage in the hundreds of millions. Now we're losing the suburbs as well as the wilderness, and you know that climate change is a factor. The Pentagon calls it a risk enhancer. So why do you act like you don't know with every new quote that it's a huge hoax? I really do want to take the charitable view, basic ignorance. That's embarrassing for you, but it's not as bad as the uncharitable view that you're funneling profits to fossil fuel and getting kickbacks. There's a lot of gas to burn, and we don't know what you own. No tax return. All we know is you had a lot of fossil fuel cronies in your cabinet, and you and Putin are homies. And all those with the most to gain from the claim that climate change is a hoax are praying that you could delay the clean energy transition long enough to cash a few chips in. Erosion of journalistic standards. We want answers, not panders. Erosion of institutions, of safeguards against pollution. Erosion of civilization. It's not too late to make changes. Erosion, erosion, erosion. Mr. President. Now, if you find yourself on the more skeptical end of the spectrum, do not walk out of my show just yet. You actually are my target audience, believe it or not. Even if so far you're like, this whole show is just a long liberal rant. That's all right. Your views will be represented, I promise. In order to achieve viewpoint diversity in this presentation, and also to address the more difficult objections to climate change action. It's not the ultra-dismissive climate change is nothing but a hoax, look, a snowball mentality that is holding us back. It is the highly informed think tank representing intellectuals who are arguing, yes, the IPCC report is right, but we still shouldn't do anything about it. That is the hard argument to get past. So I think we should hear it out and figure out what to do about it. So put your hands together for my first guest of the evening, a professional climate contrarian. You don't really have to clap for this guy. Polite though. All I ask is that you hear me out. In the marketplace of ideas, all voices must be heard, right? Well, don't worry. Everything's gonna be just fine. We've heard this kind of thing before. What's different this time? They said the population bomb is gonna get us. We're all gonna die. Resources will run out soon. We're all gonna fry. Y2K is coming. Life will be hard, right? We run out of oil or ozone. Everyone will be scarred. Civilization is doomed. Oh, it's always the lefties who salivated the thought of consumerism's death wheeze. Like all this abundance, it's gotta be just an illusion. It can't be humans innovating better and better solutions. That gut feeling that modern life is too good to be true has a lot more to do with this debate than CO2. Climate change is not a problem. It's what, a couple degrees? Are we supposed to panic over what, a warm breeze? Yes, it's happening, and it's caused by human emissions, so don't say it's science denial. This is not creationism. Call me a contrarian, a lukewarmer, call me a skeptic. All I'm suggesting is we consider the costs and the benefits. If CO2 goes up, crops are going to be more productive, and we can adapt to a planet that's warming up a bit. The most extreme scenarios are totally exaggerated. The assumptions they contain, frankly, unsubstantiated. Chances are global warming is going to be harmless, so we must have the courage to stand up to these alarmists. Besides, what's the plan? Are we going to tell African nations that after we got rich off of fossil fuels, they can't partake in them? It's the height of hypocrisy for a Western democracy to block any path to prosperity from people living in poverty, and let's be honest, renewables are just too expensive. They power 5% of global energy, unimpressive, and that 5% is still massively subsidized. So renewables only survive because governments take sides and distort the market so they can overcharge for it. Fossil fuel is what lifted us out of our former darkness, and now the forces of environmental hysteria are desperate to drag us back into a bygone era. You want chaos? Try shutting the power mains off. Rolling blackouts, gas shortages, massive massive layoffs, economic collapse, skyrocketing energy costs. You want to stop fossil fuel? Try shutting everything off. Nah, here's what's going to happen. Emissions will increase, but for like 20 or 30 years, along with prosperity, we will get off of fossil fuels after a while. We just can't let it happen on the back of an African child. We have to let the market decide. We shouldn't be too eager. Renewables can take over as soon as they're cheaper and no sooner. Otherwise, we all pay out of pocket. Yeah, climate change is real. And here's how you stop it. You do nothing. You enjoy the fruits of progress as new products hit the market and cost less. And you invest in adapting to sea level and temperature rise as the GDP soars to indefinite highs. Thanks to innovation, thanks to human ingenuity. What you don't do is put the brakes on it prematurely, because every dollar you spend on a hospital patient is a dollar you don't spend on decarbonization. Even the IPCC doesn't paint a bad picture. They say in 80 years everyone's gonna be 10 times richer. So the cost of acting now is 10 times higher. That's built into the models. You can check if you think I'm a liar. The worst thing we could do is saddle today's poor with a burden their grandchildren would have no trouble paying for. The best thing we could do is all become prosperous, rich enough to adapt if climate change tries to bother us. So what do you think, y'all? Are you with me?
It is clear that energy innovation and fossil fuels will continue to play a leading role. Energy access.
Shame on you!
Go ahead.
Shame on you!
Join in.
Shame on you!
I know you want to.
Shame on you!
I feed off
Shame
it.
on you!
It's like fuel
Shame
for me.
on you!
Yeah.
Shame on you!
I love your hatred.
on you!
Nothing can break me.
you! Shame on you!
What have I done with my life? Thank you. It's good to put yourself in other people's shoes every now and then, just to try to understand how they think. So what's wrong with that argument? I mean, come on, let's be honest. When he was talking, elements of it were sounding kind of persuasive, weren't they? There were moments where you were like, this is so plausible, I feel like I need to take a shower. Why? What's wrong? What's this? Did anybody capture the specific, like, fundamental flaw in the speech that I just gave? What was the main thing that was wrong with it? The economics, right? You can be right. You can understand the IPCC earth science side of it, but if you overestimate the cost of transitioning to renewables, underestimate the cost of the impacts of climate change on economies and human groups, and argue that the inequalities in that transition mean that we have to allow for unmitigated fossil fuel use in the future, you can make a good argument for not doing anything if you don't know the economics well enough. But the IPCC also has economists, and they say it's going to be way more expensive to wait than to do something about it. Every year makes it more expensive, more disastrous. So, we could get into the weeds, or we could just say, how about a consensus view in this room is that yes, it's happening, yes, it's human cause, and yes, it would be really expensive if we don't do anything about it, so we should agree that we should probably do something about it. Are you guys with that? Yay, there we go. Okay, the show starts now. So what should we do? This is the tricky part. The facts of it, not so hard. What to do is really hard. So why don't I begin with myself as a world-famous, global, rapping, superstar, scientific communicator, and see what I can do to mitigate my climate emissions, and then from there we can look at each of you. All right. Confession time. Forgive me for producing some emissions and pollution, but this rhythm and the music is my living. When I do it, I get paid. Yeah, it's been a decade since I've had a day job, and I did it my way like Frank Sinatra. I'm kicking up a racket. I could be at a university teaching classes, but this is more fun than teaching. Look at the people I'm reaching. Been around the world, I fly to Europe for the weekend. Do a gig in California before I fly to New Zealand. Encyclopedic Rolling Stone, pinch me, I'm dreaming. And you can check my status, got a US visa, 01, artist of extraordinary achievement. This is is all I've ever wanted, baby, living the life. In the past 5 years, 150 flights, 15 countries, 40 states and provinces. As for carbon emissions, I'm off the charts with it. Fossil fuel is how I got here, both to entertain you and in my career. If you're earning something, well then you're burning something. Prosperity is driven by internal combustion. So where my fossil fuel bottle is at? If you're burning something, holler back. You where my fossil fuel bottle is at? If you're burning something, holler back. What, no one's gonna holler back in this whole room? Yo, this is a Western democracy. Holler means shout. You guys burn a lot, okay? So when I say holler, you gotta holler. I'll go first. I've been burning the hydrocarbons at both ends, burning to make money and burning to spend, and no one tells me how to dispose of my own property. A globe-trotting solo artist with total autonomy. This is what I am. Fossil fuel is a part of me. It powers 80% of the global economy. In other words, if you have some money, it's got oil stains on it. Your hands are bloody, and if you don't believe me, go ahead and do a study. Pimping ain't easy, you better ask somebody. Cooking with gas is pimping, driving a car is pimping, energy consumption is pimping. Look at how we're living gangsta compared to horse and buggy days, cranking up the air conditioner on muggy days, not freezing to death in the winter. If energy consumption is a sin, I'm a sinner. Life is good, it's better than it used to be. Let the good times roll, fossil fuels are cheap. That's how we stay hella major. Prosperity is the bomb, player hater. So where my fossil fuel bottle is at? If you're burning something, holler back. Where my fossil fuel bottle is at? That's right, you're burning stuff, so holler back. Yeah, where my fossil fuel bottle is at? If you're burning something, holler back. Got Mother Nature on the back, but it's a one-time thing, never call her back. Wait, turn off the lights, conserve power, everything goes dark, it's Earth hour. We're taking action on climate change, all together now, back to the Stone Age. In the meantime, I'll be up in Vegas, illuminated, laughing at you player haters. Face it, ballin' is part of our nature, embrace it. You love energy wasting. Would you rather be living large and comfortably, or in a shack burning dung for heat? Some people don't have a choice, but you do, so don't hit me with any hypocritical voodoo about trying to reduce my footprint voluntarily. I'm trying to make ends, I can't let them barely meet. I'm always trying to get more gigs and fly more. I got a wife and some kids to provide for, and maybe one day solar will supply us. I hope so. Better for global climate, just don't make me choose between solar and diapers, and don't make me switch off my amplifiers. So where my fossil fuel bottle is at? If you're burning something, holler back. Where my fossil fuel bottle is at? Come on, y'all are burning stuff. Holler back. Where my fossil fuel bottle is at? If you're burning something, holler. We got Mother Nature on the back. This a one-time thing, never call her back. Holla. Thank you. You should be ashamed of yourselves, hollering back at that filth. See, clearly the rational arguments are not changing people's behavior. Even alarmed people are still driving and flying and living like they want to. What are we going to do? How are we going to stop people from following their inclinations into a climate catastrophe? What we need is a powerful moral argument. The rational arguments are failing, but if we can hit people in their emotions, we can make a big difference. So put your hands together for my second guest of the evening, not a spokesperson for Greenpeace, a spokesperson for more than 1 billion Catholics on this planet and the Lord Almighty, His Holiness Pope Francis. No crinkling candies in church. No, you guys are good. En viro Christo Domino Deus ex machina, etc. Laudato Si. Praise God the Creator, Laudato Si. These techno-capitalists don't want to mess with me. They just picked an epic rap battle of history. They're trying to defend carbon on the holy sea. I'm the Pope. This world is a paradise, and we're degrading it with our dominant technocratic paradigm. It's time for an ecological conversion. I'm as sure of that as I'm sure the Lord was born of a virgin. This earth is our home. There's nowhere else to go. We're worshiping a false god. Unlimited growth. We're poisoning the oceans and the air with carbon. We're making a golden calf out of the free market, but we're part of this world. We're created out of its dust. If we don't put limits on our appetites, they diminish us. The root cause of global warming and inequality is rampant consumerism, spiritual poverty. I'm the first pope with the sense of rhythm. At the heart of my faith is environmentalism. As a Christian, I can say that today's market fundamentalism is worse than any fundamentalism found in religion, but radical change is coming. Stop ignoring the problem. The most prosperous are destroying the global commons, while the most vulnerable watch as the sea level rises. That's a sure path to mutual destruction and violence. Anything less than a total shift in mentality is nothing less than selling our collective soul for a salary. Worshipping gold is a fallacy. Stop asking for more. Stop feeding your appetites off of the backs of the poor. It's a moral imperative to step back from self-destruction and reform the whole system of production and consumption. Rich countries owe poor countries in ecological debt. They block international action out of national interest. Selfish individual consumers driven by greed. Selfish companies fight to protect their subsidies. Selfish countries obsessed with economic development. Whatever we do next, history will remember it. And don't trust market solutions like cap and trade. That's a trick to keep polluting even if you have to pay. And those who say we need population control are dodging. We can feed 10 billion easily with greater equality. It's not about government policy. It's about changing consciousness. No technocratic fix for sustained obnoxiousness. These aren't just my views. They're also Jesus's. We need to protect nature, y'all. And also fetuses. I had to slip that in case you forgot I was Catholic. But mostly we're protecting the poor from the affluent and protecting this earth, our common home, from the tyranny of unlimited economic growth. So point to the sky where the carbon is accumulating, and point to the ground where the carbon needs to stay, and point to the left where our political future lies, and point to the right which is resisting the change. Everybody point to the sky where the carbon is accumulating. Good. Now point to the ground where the carbon needs to stay. Nice. Now point to the left, your left, yeah, where our future lies. Good. Now point to the right, which is resisting the change. Now do it faster. Point to the sky, and point to the ground, and point to the left, and point to the right. Faster again. Point to the sky, point to the ground, point to the left, point to the right. Laudato si. Thank you. And now you are converted, my children. But we still haven't solved the problem, haven't we? But we may be a little bit closer to ready. I mean, the Pope's arguments are resonating with a lot of people. It is the means of production and consumption that must be seized. Capitalism is the problem. Are you ready for the global socialist revolution? Make some noise! They're coming for your stuff first. Yeah. If you have the leisure time, well, if you're at Stanford, period, then you are one of the haves, and the have-nots are going to relieve you of whatever you'd like to give them at any moment that you're ready. That's the problem, is most people are ready. Make some noise is probably quite inappropriate, but raise your hand if you are ready to consume less for the climate. Right? Most people will. Most people will consume less for the climate. Raise your hand if you're ready to produce less for the climate. Huh? Yeah? Everyone here I think is either a professor or an administrator or a student, and those jobs all fall in a very narrow part of our industry. But what did you guys do prior to this, or outside of the academic context? Does anybody have like a job selling something, or like sales or management, accounting, or any kind of normal job outside of academia once? Yeah, what did you used to do? You're a lawyer, okay. So representing extremely polluting clients to try to get them off the hook from the difficult legislation, potentially. Not quite. Were you the kind of lawyer that could choose what clients they took and didn't take, or were you in an infrastructure where you got assigned cases? The latter, which means like if you had to defend a polluter, that was your job, right? But that is the way the law is designed. Everyone gets represented, no matter which side of what you perceive as the moral conundrum they end up on, right? Yeah, lawyers themselves don't tend to pollute that much, but they represent polluters and can potentially have a massive negative or positive impact based on which side they're fighting, right? Arguments matter. Who else used to have a job that has an emissions relevance, yeah?
So, an art teacher.
Okay, art teacher? Yeah, for sure. Like, as long as your students maintained relatively moderate ambitions of their sculpture size, the CO2 emissions wouldn't be that bad. If they decided they wanted to make paper mache Epcot centers, we're in trouble. Consumption ends up becoming part of that factor. And also, whether you're teaching art, producing it in a classroom context, or trying to make it professionally, like the most successful art gets mass produced, does it not? Right? So if you make something everybody wants on their wall, suddenly there's a huge manufacturing component to that. So the key then is to never get too successful. Does anyone else have a profession that has a climate? Did you guys have a job prior to being students? Yeah? Film industry, okay, massive consumption, massive pollution, right? But there's ways to make it green. It's just more expensive to make it green, or you can scale down the ambition of a production. If you make the whole story happen in one city block, it's less emitting than if you try to create the Catch Me If You Can or Gladiator level production scenario. What about you guys? At the Gap. All right, you are a foot soldier in their global polluting industry, but not one of the major decision makers. Although every company obviously has a CO2 policy, right? And if the employees universally rally and say, we want this to be a carbon neutral company, that does actually influence companies to change. But if you do it by yourself and no one else does it, then you get quietly shuffled out the door. It's got to be collective, doesn't it? This is the tricky part. Like production, we are very attached to, because whatever your career is, you want it to succeed and expand. That's how capitalism works. It incentivizes our ambitions. Everyone's ready to consume less. No one's ready to produce less, but everything we consume is produced by somebody. I am not ready to produce less. What do I produce? Dope-ass rhymes. Do not consume less of them. See, my future depends on the consumption of my dope-ass rhymes. Luckily, they don't have to be sold on CD anymore. They can be digitally distributed, but I'm still going to fly places to perform them. Although they can be produced very organically. You want to see how organically? Give me a beat, just with you clapping like this. Da, boo, da, boo, da, boo, da. This is what you call a freestyle rap. She was a foot soldier working at the Gap like, oh my God, this is not a dope thing. Lots of carbon emissions are coming from those clothing. So this is really difficult. Can I say, better scale down your students' paper mache? Can't you even see? It's my analysis for ya. Do not protect polluters as a lawyer. No, we got to change the laws and put a price on it. I will express it in a nice sonnet. People listen, they're like, freestyle, you ain't serious. But this is climate PhD, that's Shakespearean. That's right, it's a rhyme I'm kicking. Congratulations if you're maintaining this rhythm. It is really difficult. You're trying to listen, but you're like, right now is like a drum that I'm hitting, I'm kicking. Yes, this is the way that I said it. It's a freestyle that goes out to these academics. What I'm doing right now is called hip hop. And what's the definition of this? It can't stop. That's right, y'all. When it comes to rhyming, I would not stop this show to save the climate. I'm rocking till they make me stop. Climate change or not, I make it hot. Thank you. I'd just like to assure everyone here that I totally would stop the show if I thought it would save the climate. But I don't think it would help. Because the scientists are telling us that we're standing on a precipice. We have to convert the global emission economy until it's emissionless, and the emissions are caused by every one of our jobs, right? Every one of us contributing carbon emissions to the smog. For instance, if I write a rhyme trying to describe climate change and it's hot, so it catches on, someone's gonna fly me someplace to perform it, and the appeal of that is enormous. It's not an option for me to turn down work for global warming, cause I make it hot. Yeah, people say my rhymes are dope. I twist words until they're unrecognizable. I make it hot. I make it easy for cheesy, so hot even climate change skeptics will believe me. I make it hot, like the temperature it needs to be before the Tea Party will believe the IPCC. I make it hot. I liquefy the Greenland ice sheets, 7 meters of sea level rise. That'll do nicely. And yeah, humans are adaptable and we can toughen up, but that response ignores people who feel like it's already tough enough. Make a list of countries that nobody visits as a tourist. They have low carbon emissions emissions. The richest inflicted this on the poorest. We did it by heating our houses and feeding our spouses and flying and driving places and having no patience for power outages. The Pope calls it anthropocentric. He calls it obnoxious, but I got work to do, and work takes energy to accomplish, and I make it hot. Yeah, turn up the heat on a crowd. You make it hot too, though, so don't try to be weaseling out. I make it hot. Like the African sun, like the Paleocene, Eocene, thermal maximum, I make it hot. Feel that bass when it vibrates. Hot like the permafrost, releasing methyl hydrates. I make it hot, like a planet with low albedo. Like me rocking a trench coat on a beach instead of a Speedo. Hot with no apologies, but still I'm feeling a lot of grief for the impact my lifestyle has on the planet's ecology. My carbon footprint is bigger than cryptozoologies. I'm talking Loch Ness monstrous, so I'm not at peace, because the aggregate effect of every decision I'm making is tragic. But I can't just quit. They say that we're carbon emission addicts, but that's just glib. You want me to live in poverty abject? And if I did, what happens to greenhouse gases on average? If I quit and you don't, it's still hell in a handbasket. A traffic jam with no plan of action, fantastic. It's a classic arms race that we're trapped in. It's ominous, self-interested parties stuck in a tragedy of the commons. The problem is caused by our collective emissions of carbon, but the person who emits is not the person emissions are harming. So that's a failure of the market. Like everyone is incentivized to pollute as much as they can get away with and catch a free ride. So it's no surprise to now see emissions on the rise. When the cost of burning fossil fuel is externalized, it's effectively subsidized. It's paid for by the victims of the eventual climate impacts that are caused by our emissions. And Bill McKibben and The Guardian have been targeting investments like dirty energy is the new tobacco. So keep your distance from anybody making a profit off of fossil fuels. Cool, I'm down with the boycott. I'm just boycotting myself too, cause I make it hot. Yeah, me, I cause a heat wave. How about 9 degrees hotter than the hottest ones these days? I make it hot. Like climate refugees. Picture a hot 100 million displaced Bangladeshis. I make it hot. I spit flames, rap metaphors. A 5-alarm blaze killing the last redwood forest. I make it hot. What if I make it 6 degrees? That'd cause the extinction of 40% of species. Hot. So what are we left with? A speeding train with no brakes, some kind of a death wish, a scientific consensus that we're standing on a precipice, and a population with no idea of how to reduce their emissions. Some people do offset their footprint voluntarily with the milk of human altruism, hope, faith, and charity, but that's not gonna cut it. It's not counterproductive, but we have a global carbon budget that's globally busted, and there are hundreds of gigatons that we would have to offset. You might as well donate your piggy bank to the national debt. I ain't got no spare change to donate to carbon offsetting. I don't even want to calculate my footprint. I find it upsetting. It's like the medieval Catholic Church back when they were indulgence selling. If you get a Big Mac and a Diet Coke, your belly's still swelling. Here's what I'm willing to pay a tax or like a fee that's calculated against my carbon impacts and globally harmonized to switch incentives around and make sure most of that carbon stays safely under the ground. But I'm not gonna pay it, not unless you all pay it too. That way I could be sure that you'll do what you say you'll do. How about everyone has to pay it? No free riders allowed, no international pact with the US or China left out. You could invest it in green R&D or you could dividend it back to me. But either way, I won't be happy until the day they're carbon taxing me, cause then I can make it hot without ever feeling a chill. I'm sick of the guilt trip, killing my high when I'm feeling a thrill, so I make it hot. Yeah, I get your emotions aroused. If we don't make those hot, we're not gonna keep the oceans down, so let's make it hot. People, let's turn up the heat on polluters trying to catch a ride on the rest of us for free. I make it hot on the mic and in my social life. When I agitate for my friends to agitate for a carbon price. And that's how you make it hot. Thank you. What? This whole performance was just an elaborate scheme to try to sell us on a new tax? Typical Canadian. Carbon taxes are cool. They work great. British Columbia, where I'm from, has had one for more than 10 years. The economy has grown while the emissions went down. Canada just implemented it nationwide. It's just unpopular. But it doesn't mean it's a bad idea. It doesn't even mean government has to expand. You can dividend the revenues to each of the citizens. 2/3 of Americans end up financially better off with their carbon revenue check under the current proposal that's in Congress. I think what I can try and do at least is like defend the concept and principle of regulation and taxation with an analogy. What if the government decided to tax certain kinds of music at the expense of other kinds of music? Most people over 60 would probably vote for a rap tax. Most people under 30 would probably vote for a country music tax, but young people don't vote, so the old people would win, just like Medicare. But we can't base it on individual preferences. We have to base it on rigorous scientific evidence. So I'm going to use an example from my own career, which was influenced early by the rapper Eminem.
My name is Chicka Chicka Baba Brinkman.
And ironically, I'm an optimist. I had to be to get into hip-hop as a kid. I started rapping before Eminem came out. I thought I would be the first Caucasian to break out, but it's hip-hop, so I respect the competition. That's why I tend to defend capitalism, because I'm rapping to the rhythm, but it's still your decision. Your time, your money, you can spend it on something different. When I talk about carbon taxes, some people are like, that would be like subsidizing garbage rappers. Okay, imagine if I was government subsidized, because someone up high just loves my rhymes so much they think everybody else needs to hear it. Now everywhere you go, you're inundated with my lyrics. No thanks. I mean, I got a sense of rhythm, but I don't want none of that nanny state nepotism. I mean, when it comes to hip-hop, I'm a libertarian. Produce lots of variants, right? 1,000 flowers, let them bloom. Let most of them die if it leads to better tunes. But wait a second. Imagine if I made a record that could give people brain cancer when they listened. My fans would be in chemotherapy. Like, we started listening because he was dope lyrically. The music is addictive and carcinogenic. That's when the government regulators would step in, right? Like with cigarettes, they talk to some experts and probably tax my rap so fewer people get hurt. Imagine if I tried to deny the problem or undermine the science with some hired lobbyists. I'd go bankrupt, morally, intellectually, and eventually financially, like Peabody Energy. On the flip side, if I was dedicated to finding a solution, I could be celebrated like a billionaire making a public statement that from now on business embraces decarbonization. Imagine that. All right. Many billionaires have made that precise statement. Richard Branson has called for carbon taxing or some kind of price on carbon, the decarbonization of the economy. Of course, Bill Gates is also calling for that. But the one that is best known at this point is, of course, the CEO of Tesla. So that will be our third guest this evening to present the vision of the near future in which the technologies are allowing us to reduce carbon intensity while at the same time making money. How sweet would that be? To present that vision, put your hands together for Mr. Elon Musk. I will not even be attempting his South African accent. Yeah, you just gotta picture me rocking solar panels on my Tesla. Solar panels on my Tesla. I'm rocking solar panels on my Tesla. Green tech renaissance, better catch up. Petroleum is oh so prosaic. I'm a player when it comes to photovoltaic. So 3 cheers for my engineers. 80% price drop in the past 5 years. I've been to Germany, it's kinda gray, but most of their total power is solar on sunny days, okay? It's cheaper than coal now in 20 states. Haters hate, but they can't stop the wave. Hey! And the next phase of battery techs got that solar flowing day and night, and that'll be it. We got a gravity battery underground charging up with a solar water pump right now. Every house, every car, every business, every year make the switch and ignition switches will disappear. I'm rocking solar panels on my Tesla. You said Tesla. Use a gas guzzler? That's messed up. I'm rocking solar panels on my Tesla. Did I mention solar panels on my Tesla? Yeah. You got coal dust up in your left lung. I'm rocking solar panels on my I'm a fan of how the wind feels. Windmills power whole cities when you put them up in fields. That's the new. Fossil fuel is the old way. Don't hate on wind farms, Don Quixote. What about nuclear? That's what they asking me. Hell of a lot better for the planet than gasoline. Some new investments made can make it extra safe. I'm thinking me and Bill Gates should investigate Apollo moonshot, scalable renewables. You can't expect Mr. Musk to do it on his own. Cellulolytic biofuel and carbon capture, lifting CO2 out of thin air just like the Raptor. Gadgets to manufacture, toys to play with that make it pay when pollution poisons abated. So come fly with me on solar Cessnas and to a future of affordable Teslas. I'm rocking solar panels on my Tesla. Yeah. Use a gas guzzler, that's messed up. I'm rocking solar panels on my Tesla. Did I mention solar panels on my Tesla? Yeah. You got coal dust up in your left lung. I'm rocking solar panels on my Tesla. Hypothetically, time for a confession. Throw your hands up if you don't drive a Tesla. But if it wasn't so expensive, maybe you'd get one and be rocking solar panels on a Tesla. You got it. Thank you. That song makes less sense in Palo Alto than anywhere else I've ever performed in. Good thing there's not more people here, or throw your hands up if you don't drive a Tesla would have really fallen flat. All right. That was an old school beat. Here's a new school beat. Oh, wait, other way around. This is the old one. Anyway, if you know the lyrics, you feel free to say them with me. They're pretty well known. You can get with this, or you can get with that. You can get with this, or you can get with that. This is where it's at. Yeah. So try to get with the math. What's your greenhouse gas reduction target? How about 20 tons of carbon? That's what the average American emits every year. Ooh, that'll be easy to fix. The global average is only 4 tons, and billions of people are still trying to get more stuff, just like your stuff. And who are you to say, or who am I to say, that they should have to wait? This is everybody's problem, and that's a shame, because then it's nobody's problem. It's the same. I want to do the right thing right now. But then again, I like my lifestyle, and it can't be right for me to give it up unilaterally while y'all just live it up. See, it only works if we all jump together. So let's do it. 1, 2, 3. This is a setup. Nobody's jumping, nobody's trusted. So the gas pumps keep on pumping, and you can get with this, or you can get with that. You can get with this, or you can get with that. You can get with this, or you can get with that. But you should get with this, because this is where it's at, right? Where it's at. All right, so let's try to get with the inclination to put all our faith in innovation to save us instead of reining in some misbehavior. Innovation, that's a risky wager. Come on, how long does it take innovation to reverse the one basic equation, the foundational perverse incentive, where dirty is cheap and clean is expensive? Remember, this is a physical system. It doesn't give a damn about your relative emissions or whether emissions are caused by decadent living or visiting relatives at Christmas. This is everything. It's everything we manufacture. It's concrete, steel, glass, plastic. Whether or not you change your little habits, absolute emissions is all that matters. So you can get with that, business as usual, everybody wriggling through their own loophole, or you can get with this, an arms control agreement. And if that's what you want, act like you mean it. Thank you. All right, I'm not sure if I've converted everybody onto the take action side of the spectrum over the course of the past hour. I hope so, but either way, I think we should try a little thought experiment. Imagine we're not leaders of the free world representing millions here at this global conference, and instead we're just some normal everyday academics on Stanford at a residency hall, trying to figure out what to do about climate change. I've been trying to figure out what to do about climate change and write it into rap songs, but I know that my picture I paint is always incomplete. So I always ask the audiences to add things that are really important that I failed to talk about, because that is how we can achieve the total picture is by taking everyone's ideas and assessing them and integrating them. So let's have a short Q&A at this point. Anything that I touched on that you think I should add to my climate change rap portfolio, I will attempt to work it into the final rap in the form of a freestyle, improvised response to the thing you raise. And that way we will have achieved true global consensus and a comprehensive plan in 1 mere hour. So it's wide open. Yes? Yeah, the generational injustice factor is massive, isn't it? Unfortunately, the people that have the greatest stake in that also have the fewest, the least leverage, right? So it takes, and like ironically, I think the fact of concern for children probably is holding us back more than accelerating us, because everybody's like, my children are not going to be the first ones to suffer in my self-sacrifice. I'm not spending my kids' college fund on some kind of green initiative. If you don't do that to your kids' college fund, ironically, they all end up worse off. Yeah, I have 2 kids myself. They're going to be around my age in 2050, which is when we're supposed to get to net zero emissions globally. Anybody, do you have children as well? Yeah. I read somewhere that the number one thing you can do to double your carbon emissions is have a child. So shout out to all the childless in the room who are also the greenest. But that's why it makes this really hard, right? It's the things we care about the most that are often the biggest polluting, like save the planet, kill your dog. Hard. But yeah, we got to address that. Generational injustice. I'll put it in the freestyle. What else? Cholera. Yes, absolutely. I thought you meant as some kind of component of the solution space. I was trying to release it in the Republican side of the House and see what happens now. Yeah, of course, it does, that's part of the human impact side of the scenario, isn't it? Yeah. Well, but maybe like the fear of cholera spread will work better than the fear of sea level rise. Maybe there needs to be a whole suite. Didn't you say that there was like a correlation between gonorrhea spread as well? And yeah, there we go. That one hits even closer to home. Yeah. All right. What about you, 2 young people, for which this entire presentation was devised in the first place, and into which all of our hopes are now focused? Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I referenced it a bit in the opening rap, right? Sort of the benchmarks of CO2 increase do kind of correlate with the population explosion. And so historically, you could make the argument that the growth from 2 billion to 7.2 billion over the past 150 years, past 50 years, that's part of the reason we're in trouble. That doesn't mean... Yeah, exactly. And it also doesn't mean curtailing population is necessarily the best strategy for dealing with climate, right? There are ways to make the planet green and habitable for everyone that's here. And you're right, that like control population initiatives, they always focused on the poorest countries, don't they? Because they're the ones that are expanding. But mainly that's coupled to economic growth. So once extreme poverty isn't all around, women tend to voluntarily have fewer children. It's like the demographic shift. So even the people that are trying to say, we need to reduce population growth, the most effective way to do that is not the one-child policy, is it? It's just like give young women economic and educational opportunities, and it'll naturally happen. Do you see the appeal of that, or do you think we should just not say population? You think the Pope's analysis was the best? Yeah, okay. He's good. Pontifex. It's a great account. Yeah. And a lot of people are advocating for that, and that's correlated in some degree to the Green New Deal that AOC is promoting right now, right? That's like, okay, let's have inequality be coupled to our response, and it should be. And at the UN is part of what they call the common but differentiated responsibilities aspect of the agreement. The countries that contributed the most to the historical fact of climate change are supposed to contribute the most to remedying it and do technology transfers and stuff like that. All right, well, put that all on freestyle too. All right, thank you for the Q&A, unless there's anything else. You can throw words at me that you think will be tough to rhyme with if you want. That's what I'm going to do now, okay? Here we go. I'm about to do a totally improvised rap about addressing injustice and not pinning this whole thing on population and also cholera. But before I freestyle, I'm going to do a written intro to try to make you understand what a freestyle is. Because a freestyle is not free. A freestyle is regulated. That's what keeps it elevated instead of degraded. I voluntarily restrain it so you get something from it. It's free, but it's not free. It needs infrastructure. You want to hear a freestyle that's literally free? Check it out. Yeah, I improvised every syllable in that sequence. But was the lack of semantic content a weakness? Okay, fine. Here's a freestyle that's slightly less free. Bird, bee, watermelon, seed. Do it for the kids, that would be sweet. Those words came straight up off of the top of my dome. But in retrospect, they didn't have a point or a flow. So I suppose when I freestyle, it should really have parameters so we could tell the difference from professionals to amateurs, right? It's got to work sonically, rhythmically, and logically. Better off with better laws, like market economies, because freestyle ain't free. Freestyle's regulated. It's the rhyme and rhythm that makes it lyrically innovative, and freedom ain't free either. Freedom involves trade-offs. We don't want a banker to be free like Bernie Madoff. I want you to have the freedom to say whatever you're thinking, but not the freedom to drive on the highway when you're heavy drinking, right? Freedom ain't free. You say you want a free market. I want a market free from people dumping their garbage on me. Freedom ain't free. Now don't freak out. But this is the time that I'm about to switch into the freestyle. See, what I'm saying is, let's not tag this to population growth. Only speaking of which, a higher turnout would have been dope. See how I'm saying? I am just linking your concepts. I don't even know what thinking thoughts are gonna come next. All I know is if I make a little mistake over the rhythm, I'm down with evolution, so I introduce mutations into the system. Yeah, that's right. I am always wrong-headed. I will find a lot of young people's minds like a virus and spread it. Oh, wait a second. After I did that reference, Jamie was like, you're not serious. I don't study viruses, I study bacterias. Yeah, that's the way that I correct it for all of ya. We will solve this problem by scaring people with cholera, or maybe by reducing cholera in countries that currently have it. I can find a way to do that with my freestyle rap, and I will just maybe innovate and it won't be AZ, but I can have a greater impact here than if I did a PhD. I keep telling myself that so I can keep on rapping. But come on, if I don't get more turnout, it's not gonna happen. Nah, check it out. It's a freestyle straight up when I bust this. It's about intergovernment and intergenerational injustice. We gotta do it for the kids. See, when I'm kicking these raps, that's why when I go home, my 5-year-old's always kicking my ass. Like, hurry up, Dad, solve the climate crisis. I'm like, I tried, baby. Last night my freestyles were the nicest, but they did not tend to have the impact that I wanted. So fuck it. Gonorrhea, I guess I've got it up in my brain. I don't know, I am just freestyling randomly. Anything that comes up at me in my brain, I can handle things, or maybe I can't, and that's why I had a meltdown. But I hope I said at least a couple of words that you felt. Now it's my freestyle, can't you even see? But it's not free, I mean, come on. The freedom in us requires sacrifice. If pollution causes harm, I say pollution should have a price. Freedom ain't free. Hope you like that freestyle, even if it wasn't entirely free. Peace out. Thank you. Thank you all so much. That is the Rap Guide to Climate Chaos. You've been a fabulous audience. Quality over quantity. What? Yeah, that's, there's a record if you want to share it virally that way. It's a CD, it's on iTunes and all that, and there's YouTube stuff, and it's going to have a massive impact globally, I swear. And if you have friends that come to New York, I do it in New York like every week or two as well. So, yeah. Oh, yeah, and I think there's a reception after if you haven't had enough of me yet. We got hummus. But thank you guys all so much for being here. If anyone was watching on the live stream, hope you enjoyed that. Should have been in this seat right here. Right. Yeah, exactly. I would have done this rap right to them. Yeah, that's it. That's the show. Thank you.